On the JASmius scam. Welcome to another edition, the Open Thighs Friday edition of the Hard Starboard Radio Network. At blogtalkradio.com/HSR Network. I didn't stick that in on the first take, so I've got to get in there now. Now, the camera is on. Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. I am your host, JASmius, your ruler, your benevolent despot, your fountain rabbi of conservatism, constitutionalism, Christianity, and common sense. Monday through Friday, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. blogtalkradio.com/HSR Network. Guest call-in number 646-478-5068. Email address jasmius@comcast.net. Chat room is open, and what do you want? I've been sleeping all day. I'm not ill. Excuse me. I'm not ill, trust me. It's just that there really has not been anything to write about today at politicalpistachio.com, at least until this afternoon. Nothing all morning that really caught my eye. I mean, not even the Washington Post's attempt at bleep stirring. We're talking about Republican leaders are quietly preparing for a brokered convention next year! Who cares? Suffice it to say that they would be idiots if they weren't preparing for a brokered convention next year. Why are they doing it? Because the ridiculously overcrowded Republican field. That's why. It's not real complicated. 17. I think it topped out at 17 candidates, and it's now pretty much narrowed down to. Well, I was going to say 4, but the way that Ben Carson is dropping like an anchor, it's probably down to 3. Trump, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio. And if you wanted to throw Ben Carson in there, you could, but see, this is why I want to have all my audio clips with me. Nope, I'm not going to spill the beans yet. Nothing is done yet, but I want to have them all with me for moments like this. Like I said, I'd include Ben Carson, but Ben Carson's numbers have been going like this. For the last 2-3 weeks, so I don't even really count Ben Carson anymore. And Carson, I just stick a sock in it. I like Ben Carson. I've said it before. I like Ben Carson. I respect Ben Carson. Ben Carson is way smarter than I am, and way more accomplished than I'll ever be. So don't get the wrong idea. But look at his poll. His poll numbers are dropping through the floor. I mean, he had about a 2-month run on top of the polls as the front runner, and then the Paris attacks happened, and then San Bernardino happened, and then it's that. I mean, sometimes life sucks, and of course Donald Trump's numbers should be dropping for the exact same reason, but that hasn't happened yet. Although there's still one thing you have to remember: only. All the to-do about, 2/3 of Donald Trump supporters would leave with him if he decided to leave the Republican Party. Well, there's another poll that states that only about half of Donald Trump's supporters have absolutely committed to it. Now, I know what you're going to say. Well, that's more than anybody else in the Republican field. Well, sure, okay, but still, half. So don't get too, don't get all you Trumplicans out there. Don't your guy hasn't won anything yet. There hasn't been any votes cast. And I am still of the opinion I remain of the opinion that Donald Trump is the Howard Dean of the 2016 Republican presidential race. You remember Howard Dean back in 2004? He led the Democrat race all of 2003, and right up until the Iowa caucuses, and then a last frayed chord of sanity held, and the Democrats went with John Kerry instead, guaranteeing a narrow defeat rather than a landslide defeat. I think that's what Donald Trump is. Donald Trump is going to lead this race right up until the Iowa caucuses, and then he'll lose. I mean, Ted Cruz has already passed him up in Iowa. And then he'll lose in New Hampshire, and then that'll be it. And then he'll pick up his ball and bolt the party and say, "Oh, I haven't been treated fairly." Not being treated fairly translating to "I didn't win." And then he'll go his way, and then it's like for those of you out there who are hung up on, "Oh, well, it's way too late for him to build a national organization and to turn out the vote campaign to get on the ballot in all 50 states." He doesn't have to get on the ballot. All he has to do is buy airtime on the networks which the networks will give him. Just like they're giving him all this, and been giving him for the past 6 months, all this free media. Anytime he wants to get on TV, all he has to do is pick up the phone, and they're practically beating down his door. All he has to do is get on TV all of next year and say, "Write in Donald Trump." A write-in campaign. That's all he has to do, and it'll work. Now, would it get him elected? No, but it would accomplish his purpose, which is to put Hillary Clinton in the White House, or back in the White House. So, but anyway, about this brokered convention thing, I didn't write about it. Just not. Gosh, that's the only thing I don't like about laptops is the touchpad, and I accidentally touched the touchpad, so sorry. But I mean, and the Washington Post is just trying to stir the crap. Republicans are going to screw Donald Trump. The establishment is going to force their candidate on the party out of my smoke-filled room under the guise of a brokered convention. Bull. Hunky. You really think they would have the courage to do that? I mean, their idea is to win. If they did that, they're not going to win by doing that. The anger in the conservative roots would be palpable and raging, and it makes that very same anger that Donald Trump's been exploiting. You get to the top of the poll, so no, you don't have to worry. You can relax. You don't have to worry. That's not going to happen. The RNC is not going to do that. Gee, I mean, can you imagine how pissed everybody would be in the Republican grassroots if the RNC rolled out Mitt Romney? Totally deadlocked, and out comes Mitt Romney 3.0. Oh, boy. Yeah, that'd fire everybody up, but not in a good way. So they're just preparing. They're just preparing because the crowd is too blasted big. So they're making contingency plans for, what happens if, I don't know, Ted Cruz has like 40% of the delegates needed, and Marco Rubio and Donald Trump have 30% each, or something like that. Some combination of therein. What do they do then? They gotta have some contingency plan ready. So that's all that they're doing. So I just didn't think. I still don't think it's worth writing about. I haven't written about it. It's just the WAPO trying to stir the bleep. So I'm not writing about it. I guess I'm talking about it now in a spontaneous fashion. But anyway, that's not really table setting, is it? Anyway, there are 8.5 years plus of podcasts awaiting your downloading at blogtalkradio.com/HSR network, where you are right now. 6 1/3 plus more years worth await you at blogtalkradio.com/American Daily Review, the kickoff and first 2 hours of the 3-hour Saturday afternoon extravaganza. Co-hosted by myself and Mr. Douglas V. Gibbs, America's Constitution Authority, fellow of the American Freedom Alliance, director of the Center for the Study of the United States Constitution, who, by the way, is in a bit of a local brouhaha down in Murrieta, California, for sticking up for the lone and besieged and beleaguered sane member of the Murrieta City Council, Harry Ramos, who the city of Murrieta has a 5-member city council, and the mayoralty just kind of rotates around the members. So there's not an office of mayor. It's just whoever turn it is to hold the gavel. And I'm not sure why they got such a bug up their butt about Harry Ramos, because he's the only sane member of the city council, which means the city council cabal, if you will, can get anything they want. It's just the vote is 4-1 rather than being unanimous. Well, so what? You still get what you want, right? But they have this big thing where they smeared Harry Ramos as a satyr, a Bill Clinton type, a horn dog, a sexual harasser of women, and so forth. And on that basis, they took the gavel away from him, so he doesn't get to be mayor anymore. And they're trying to drive him off the city council down there altogether. And so, my friend, that's right. Anybody who wants to take a shot at me all 1,200 miles up the coast down there, feel free. My friend, Douglas Vernon Gibbs, stuck up for Harry Ramos. Harry Ramos is a friend of his. He believes in Harry Ramos. And he wrote a piece at politicalpistachio.com sticking up for Harry Ramos. A couple of them, actually. Apparently that's ruffled some feathers, and I take that as prima facie evidence that they're afraid of Douglas V. Gibbs and the influence he has. Because I don't know any other reason why a blogger who isn't even in Murrieta City government would take such offense to Mr. Gibbs' defense of Harry Ramos that they would hack somebody else's email account to send out an email all around the area to media outlets smearing Mr. Gibbs in turn. Not as a sexual harasser. I guess he's been distributing his rugged countenance too much. I'm just kidding, Doug. But I'm not gonna mention any of the details. But some hacked some city employees' email account and sent out an email to media outlets in the local area down there smearing Mr. Gibbs. So I mean, they fear him. They know that his word locally down there carries a lot of weight. They don't call it the Gibbs pocket for nothing, after all. And so I'm sure, well, I don't know if we'll hear about it or not tomorrow on Constitution Radio, the 3rd hour of the Saturday afternoon extravaganza, 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific, at KMET1490am.com, globally, and the same place on your AM radio dial in the Gibbs pocket. KMET 1490 AM Smart Talk Radio. News, talk, sports. But that'll be up to Mr. Gibbs as to how much or what he wishes to disclose of this. I've just kind of teased it for tomorrow in case he does. And if he doesn't, well, then I've teased for nothing. It's like trailers. I was looking at In fact, the X-Men Apocalypse movie trailer came out today. And boy, I tell you what, it's like you get a little jaded, I suppose. You could get a little jaded about all these superhero movies, Marvel. Well, Marvel driven. There's Marvel Cinematic Universe, and then there's also X-Men, which is owned by 20th Century Fox. So Marvel, they're not within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but let's see. First Friday in May is Captain America 3: Civil War, which looks pretty darn good. It looks pretty darn good. They're also they're nicknaming it Avengers 2.5 because there are quite a few Avengers characters in Cap 3. But then Memorial Day, X-Men 6 Apocalypse debuts, and oh boy, from the trailer, and I almost jizzed myself. I mean, it was good. It looks. Oh man, I mean, just in the trailer, of course, you got Professor X, played by James McAvoy, who, yes, this is the movie where he's gonna put on the bald wig at some point. So they saved that till the very end of the trailer. Then you see Professor X, and what the hell happened to his hair? Oh, this is when that happens. Oh boy! I bet James McAvoy was just thrilled with that. And of course, Michael Fassbender is Magneto, and the Brotherhood of Mutants. In fact, there's one that I didn't quite recognize. In fact, I was gonna say it most resembled the Vision from Avengers, so I'm not sure who that is. And Jennifer Lawrence is Mystique, and I can't remember the actor's name who plays Havoc. Scott Summers, the Scott Summers Havoc character. He's going to be in it. Nightcrawler is going to be in it. They got somebody playing Jean Grey, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense because the X-Men Apocalypse takes place sometime during the 1980s. So Jean Grey was approximately 10 years old at about that time. So might have a continuity problem with that one. But you got someone playing Cyclops. Alex Summers was Havoc. Excuse me. Sorry about that. Although 25 years later, after the events of X-Men First Class, even Alex Summers would be pushing 50. So I'm not sure. I mean, it's the same actor. So you got someone playing Scott Summers, Cyclops, who's got to be like Alex Summers' nephew. It couldn't be his brother. There's just too much of a age difference there. But no, it's not James Marsden. It's some other actor playing. Just like Storm. Oh crap! Sorry. I got a new fan in my office here, so my broadcasting studio, and that keeps periodically pulling the surge protector down, so I had to remedy that. Storm is in X-Men 6 Apocalypse, although it's not Halle Berry, so there will be a new Storm and a new Cyclops. And in fact, according to the trailer, the heads up that the X-Men get about Apocalypse, Abin in Sewer, I think that's right, is a precognitive vision that Jean Grey has, which that wasn't her power, although you never really knew. Because remember, Jean Grey was Dark Phoenix in the comic books, and then a little bit in X-Men 3: The Last Stand. So I don't know. I mean, you never fully knew what the extent of her powers were. I mean, she was telekinetic, certainly, and very intelligent, and okay with Famke Janssen's hot, but Famke Janssen's not in here either. So, new Jean Grey. But as Dark Phoenix, I mean, she seemed to have virtually limitless power. So I mean, she could be precognitive. Although I thought that, remember in X-Men 5, the Wolverine, that that Japanese chick with the red wig, she was precognitive, or at least in a limited sense. So, well, I guess it's that. He goes back to that William Stryker line in X-Men 2, X-Men United, what he sends Lady Deathstroke in to fight Wolverine, and he says, "I used to think you were one of a kind, Wolverine. Guess I was wrong." So, anyway, that's coming next Memorial Day, and the trailer just came out today. It looks awesome. Same thing with Cap 3, Captain America 3 Civil War. That just looks, oh man. That one fight scene where Cap and Winter Soldier are double teaming Iron Man, it's like, hoo boy. Although, why doesn't Iron Man get out of such close quarters combat? Because that's not really the strength of the Iron Man suit. Strength of the Iron Man suit is, you gotta have some room to maneuver. I mean, because that's what he had. Remember the fight that Iron Man had with Thor in the first Avengers movie? Stark was getting his ass kicked when it was in close quarters. I mean, remember he headbutted Thor, and then Thor headbutted him back, and there was a dent in the helmet, the Iron Man helmet. I mean, Iron Man has to be in motion. He can't close quarters. It's just not going to happen. And that's what it looks like. In fact, you see the very last shot in the Cap 3 trailer, Cap looks like he's trying to decapitate Iron Man. Assuming that that's from the same scene, we don't know. We don't know. So that's what a trailer is for. It gets you curious and fired up. So. Yeah, that'll be in the month of May next year. Will just be awesome. Cap 3, Captain America 3, Civil War to start the month of May. X-Men 6 Apocalypse to conclude it. Boy, I cannot wait, man. Cannot wait. Boy, have I gone on a long time. But that's all right, because the stack for today is not as as you probably deduced from what I said earlier, the stack for today is not that big. Not that big. In fact, we might have room for a couple of town hall rants. Townhall.com that were very nice. In fact, one of them echoes me. It seems like everybody's echoing me. And you would be able to learn that for yourself with the 8.5+ years of podcasts at blogtalkradio.com/HSR Network, the 6 1/3 years of podcast at blogtalkradio.com/American Daily Review, any of the 200 episodes of Constitution Radio with Douglas V. Gibbs during his 3.5-year run on KCAA, and to get them, you have to send me an email, JASmius@comcast.net, specify the dates, I'll be happy to send them to you. And then KMET1490am.com, you'll find on the show Constitution Radio show page the portal to all of our podcasts on KMET since this past May the 2nd. And, of course, there are our YouTube channels, youtube.com/HardStarboardRadio, which will be updated for last week tonight, and youtube.com/American Daily Review 2, which has already been updated for last Saturday. Wow, maybe I shouldn't be running the board. A little inside joke stemming from the thing that I'm not going to disclose any details about yet. You know, and in all that exposition on brokers, Marvel movie trailers, and the like, I forgot to refresh the page at politicalpistachio.com. Oh well. I mean, I had all that time, like 35 minutes in which to do it. Never did it. It just never occurred to me. So, um, oh, I gotta scroll down to where I want to start the program today. For quotes. That's all. Uh, and my broadcasting computer wants to be balky. But I'm almost there. One more click should do it. And I went 2 clicks instead of 1. But then you never know when your computer is wading through molasses. It's not clear how many, how far down the page 1 click will send you. So, at any rate, now this is what you call a Sisyphean task, a futile task, but one that needs to be made anyway. Christian church leaders are seeking designation of ISIS's genocide of Christians in the Middle East as genocide. The problem is they're seeking that designation from the Obama regime. Now you see why it's so difficult. It's kind of a good news, bad news thing. Good news, Christians seeking designation of ISIS as genocide of Christians as genocide. Bad news, they got to get the Obama administration to actually do it. The same Obama regime that isn't resisting and has no desire to fight or stop the Islamic State, and is at best utterly indifferent to the fate of Christians elsewhere in the world, and irredeemably hostile to them here at home, and at worst, quietly applauds their slaughter and cleansing from the Middle East and believes that they had it coming. And you don't doubt that that's exactly what Barack Obama thinks. Not going to say it, but he doesn't really have to, does he? The 21st century apostles here are heroic and are absolutely doing the right thing. But I do not envy them their task. The quote is from Newsmax. Christian leaders are urging the Obama administration to classify the religious-based killings by the Islamic State as genocide, according to Politico. The genocide designation could help make it possible for victims of persecution to, get this folks, gain refugee status! Force the United States to act on their behalf. They have not been so designated, folks. All the talk you hear about Syrian refugees, Syrian refugees, Syrian refugees, they're all Muslims. Now, sure, I know, Middle East, of course, most of them are going to be Muslim, but they're not accepting any Christians, just Muslims. I mean, you talk about, well, who deserves to be a refugee more, a Christian in the Middle East or a Muslim? Boy, now there would be a quid pro quo for you, though. If the one is bound and determined to absorb hundreds of thousands of Muslim refugees into our towns, communities, and neighborhoods, would he be willing to extend the same courtesy to their Christian victims to make it happen? No, he wouldn't! The State Department already is debating whether to assign the genocide debating. Hey, I got a good one. Why do we designate Christians in the Middle East as refugees and label what the Islamic State is doing to them genocide? That's the debate. Now, they are genuinely debating whether to assign the genocide label to Yazidis, who practice a religion that mixes Zoroastrianism, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. In other words, paganism. So the State Department, understand this, folks, the State Department is debating whether to assign the genocide label to Yazidis. They're not debating it about Christians. Not even on the table. That decision is expected soon. Yeah, sure they will. Sure they will. Yeah, there's not enough pagans in this country. Pagans and Muslims! Christians? The question is, of course, rhetorical. Congressional Republicans could hold all 535 seats and they'd still have zero leverage over Barack Obama because he's got power. Consequently, he doesn't have to acquiesce to any quid pro quo, nor cut any deals with the GOP. No, he cuts deals with the Iranian mullahs. He cuts deals with the Islamic State. He cuts deals with Vladimir Putin. He doesn't cut deals with the Republicans. Why? Because the Republicans are the real enemy. That's why. But it would be fascinating to see what he would do if he had to make that choice. I'm genuinely uncertain which way he would go. Regardless, it's not as if Foggy Bottom doesn't have plenty of evidence supporting the Christian genocide designation. They include evidence of ISIS assassinations of church leaders, mass murders, torture, kidnapping for ransom in the Christian communities of Iraq and Syria, its sexual enslavement and systematic rape of Christian girls and women, its practices of forcible conversion to Islam, which isn't genuine, it's just forcing them to mouth the words, its destruction of churches, monasteries, cemeteries, and Christian artifacts, and its theft of lands and wealth from Christian clergy and laity alike. Picture that, folks. Picture all you guys out there, picture your wives and daughters being dragged away from Islamic State emir's harem while you get beheaded. Probably castrated first and then beheaded. Like with an olive fork. A butter knife, maybe. I mean, the fact that the Obama regime has to be lobbied to apply a label to this infamy that ought to be a self-evident no-brainer really tells us all we need to know. Definitely got to take that one with me. Here's another purpose for Obamanomics. And it makes perfect sense. It's a logical conclusion to what Barack Obama is doing to the American economy. First of all, did you know that 1 of 2 Americans are now on some sort of government assistance? Low income or poor? Thanks, Barry, Chris, Nancy, Harry, and company. Thanks for Obamalays, Obamanomics, ObamaCare, overspending on pork, and all your failed policies the last 7 years. Now, as all of you know, I am not a class warrior. I climbed the economic ladder to the smack dab middle of the middle class until I was blasted off of it and into officially defined poverty over 2 years ago. Yes, I'd like to avenge myself upon the son of a bitch that did that to me by having the same thing done to him, which is impossible, but it's always nice to have a fantasy to serve as a pleasant distraction. No other means. It wouldn't be revenge if it wasn't an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. In this case, having his career destroyed. That's the kind of avenging I'm talking about. No physical harm to anybody. But not because he made twice what I did. I don't detest this particular individual because he made twice what I did, even when I was at my former career's pinnacle, and he was manifestly unworthy of it. And what he's since gone on to, recently came into the knowledge of. I've simply never cared about how much other people earned. I've never considered it to be my business because, well, it isn't. And it isn't any of your businesses as well. That sort of thing can inspire one to try to attain the same great things for yourself and your family, but far more often it breeds resentment and a desire to tear down and rob them of what they've earned instead. I mean, the reason why envy is one of the 7 deadly sins. And envy, in other words, levels. It does not lift up. Or uplift, if you prefer. That is why the constant, endless, incessant rhetoric about the middle class every election cycle drives me absolutely nuts. Everything has to be done for the middle class, the implication being that the wealthy are either irrelevant or screwed, even though it is in reality very difficult to actually screw the wealthy, and without them there would be no jobs for the middle class. The idea should be to free up everybody, every income level, every economic strata, every class, to go as far as talent, skills, knowledge, and opportunity can take them. Let the poor become working class become middle class become rich become the 1%. Hell, let everybody become the 1%. Yeah, I know I should sign up for a remedial mathematics course, but you get the point I'm trying to make. Pandering entirely to one economic strata does nothing to benefit the overall economy, and that is what is desperately needed if the great Obama depression is ever to be brought to an end. Now, so stop obsessing over how the pie is divvied up and focus on growing the pie instead. You want to improve your family's quality of life? You're going to have to let your wealthier neighbors do the same. You'd think people would be able to live with that. I was perusing a Newsmax finance article yesterday on how much fruit the Obama war on the middle class is bearing. The first time since that economic measurement began decades ago that the middle class is not the majority of the American population. Yeah, that's right, folks. The middle class, which is supposed to be the backbone of the country, the backbone of the American economy, no longer a majority of the American population. Which is what happens when economic opportunities are taken away from middle classers by soak-the-rich classism that simply motivates the 1% to pull their financial resources out of productive endeavors and enterprises and into non-productive shelters. Having lunch. And the effect for the middle class? Lost jobs, lower wages, and sagging into lower economic strata. Such an outcome is always the case in communist or communizing countries. In its end form, there is the top 10% or so, the ruling party elite, and the other 90% are impoverished slaves. And the only way to improve your lot in life is to sell out to the Communist Party. Corruption, in other words. The ultimate corruption. But impoverished slaves that, and we're going to be talking about that, I'm more on the VA coming up in hour number 2, by the way. But impoverished slaves that in the earlier stages of that process don't realize what they are or that is their intended fate. because they've been brainwashed into believing that the rich and not the government has done it to them. Which brings us to a quote from the aforementioned Newsmax finance piece close to the very end of it. To be sure, being a member of the middle class has long been treated as an American badge of honor. For decades, the middle class has been the core of the country. A healthy middle class kept America strong, experts and politicians told CNN Wire, like they'd be capable of telling him anything else. But more recently, these residents have struggled under stagnating wages and soaring costs. Presidential candidates on both sides of the political aisle, one side more honestly, the other side more dishonestly, are campaigning on ways to bolster the nation's middle class and increase opportunities to climb the economic ladder, CNN Wire reported. Most Americans have traditionally identified themselves as middle class, even those at the top and bottom, reflecting a kind of cultural heritage tied to the American dream of self-reliance, the Sacramento Bee reported, or explained. But the Great Obama Depression has shaken that image. A recent Gallup poll showed that just 51% of U.S. adults considered themselves middle or upper middle class, with 48% saying they are part of the lower or working class. What do you think the motivation is there? Maybe it's because having money has been so demonized over the last 7 years? Patrick Egan, a politics professor at New York University, says the Pew findings and the Gallup survey, probably political science is what I'm guessing that refers to, says the Pew findings and the Gallup surveys suggest that the public may be more open to policies of redistribution. State-sanctioned theft, in other words. Probably more as a defensive measure, I would guess. Well, if you pretend not to be rich, maybe they won't come after me. Americans are always kind of reluctant to embrace open class warfare, Egan said. But if more Americans are under the idea of placing themselves at the bottom, you'll see politicians follow. He told the Tribune. What Tribune? I don't know. It didn't say. That's bad editing on Newsmax Finance's part. End of quote. The Democrats, of course, have always been at the bottom. In more ways than one. What Egan is saying is that Republican politicians will follow. Political battles will no longer be about economic growth, but about which economic strata gets more of an ever-shrinking pie. And while one would think that Tea Partiers would never stand for such a thing, rhinos! Let us remember after whom they flocked mindlessly over the summer. Pity I didn't have this ready to go. Yes, that's right. Donald Trump, the Al Shervick of the Republican Party, and the protectionist big government wealth confiscation policies he touts. The last I checked, this man was at or near the top of the Republican primary polls. I mean, you could even say that Barack Obama didn't have to force Donald Trump on the GOP, but that the GOP willingly became Trumplicans. At least 30% of them, 15% absolutely. Which is to say, gave up, wittingly or unwittingly, the American dream and helped kill it stone cold dead. Now that's a presidential legacy. We'll go to the break a little bit early today and be back with hour number 2 of the Hard Starboard Radio Network right after this. Bet you thought I fell asleep again, huh, folks? Welcome to hour number 2, Open Thighs Friday on the Hard Starboard Radio Network. Big Bang Theory update. No, I'm not going to play the theme. I don't have it in the audio cue. Hot, dense state, 14 billion years. You notice they say in the Big Bang Theory theme, the lyric says 14 million years ago. It should be billion. Then nearly 14 billion years ago. I can't. The lyrics get kind of garbled after that. But Big Bang Theory update. Next Thursday. Buckle your seatbelts, put your trays in the upright and locked position. Sheldon and Amy are going to do it. Well, I tell you, their story arc this season is just, I mean, it's gone at warp speed. I mean, they've gone from the season finale last year where Amy broke up with Sheldon before he could propose to her. Had a ring and everything. A ring that had been in his family for generations, as a matter of fact. And to being broken up, to Amy, the 6'7" English guy that she's been kind of sort of dating, and there was an episode where Howard and Raj put his name on a dating site again, only this time with his knowledge. And this hot blonde came to his door, and I'm sure he could have nailed her if he wanted, but he said, "Well, sorry, you were 15 minutes late or 15 seconds late," because the idea was for whoever answered his dating site ad to show up by midnight. And this gal shows up like 15 seconds after midnight, and he sends her away because she was, didn't make it, you're 15 seconds late, bye, slam. Which is just so Sheldon, right? And so to the November 19th episode, I think that's right, where they decided to see if they could spend a day together hanging out as friends. But at the end of which, Amy wanted to get back together, but Sheldon shot it down. I just don't think it works. I'm just not cut out for romance. And to last night's episode, where Sheldon had that Beach Boys song in his head, and then from that deduced that, well, that means I got to get back together with Amy. And then shows up at Amy's apartment, right in the middle of her date with this 6'7" English guy, and says, "Oh, I love you, Amy. I want to be your boyfriend again. I want you to be my girlfriend again." And then did they play some tonsil hockey? I don't know how Jim Parsons got through the process of kissing a woman. But anyway, so now the winter finale, half-season, mid-season finale, I guess it is. Next Thursday, Sheldon and Amy Shamey are gonna do it. Let's get physical, physical. They're gonna get physical. I don't even want to imagine. Maybe they'll be like Mrs. Hardstarver and me, who couldn't consummate it. Technically, she got me off. Don't get me wrong, but she couldn't technically consummate it, but then did a few days later. I'm not going to go into the deal. I've already disclosed too much, but you just picture Sheldon Cooper having coitus. Sheldon Cooper having coitus. He's probably going to whip out a coitus contract. And it'll be like 30 or 40 pages long. And by the time that Amy is signed and initialed in triplicate, he'll already be asleep. But I'll tell you, although I will tell you this, Mayim Bialik, who I forget what show she was on back in the day, and then a child actor, and then went on to, her character Amy Farrah Fowler is a PhD in neuroscience. Well, guess what? Mayim Bialik, the actress who plays Amy Farrah Fowler, is a PhD in neuroscience. So she doesn't have to act that part. She already knows that. But boy, she's not bad looking in real life. So they really tamped down her looks for the Amy Farrah Fowler character. But boy, in the bedroom scene that they promoted last night, boy, not bad, man. Not too bad at all. I wouldn't be pushing her out of bed if I were married to her. At any rate, so that's your Big Bang Theory update. I just had to mention that, get that out there, that Sheldon's going to be getting that in there. I would like to see them actually show every rub, poke, squirt, gurgle, just to see how Sheldon would go about it. No kidding. I can't picture that. No wonder all the characters are going, "Oh my God!" So that's next Thursday, 8 p.m. on Columbia Barak System. Now, does North Korea have hydrogen bombs, ladies and gentlemen? That's a fair question to ask. I mean, I know, it's Kim Jong-un, the dictator, the pot-bellied pig, the king of bluster, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All had and no cattle, all sizzle and no steak, except that his father blustered about having nuclear weapons, and while he might have been and grandfather too, I guess, Kim Jong-il and his grandfather Kim Il-sung, who retains to this day the title of Eternal President. So in other words, Barack Obama is going to be committing gimmick infringement next year. But they blustered about having nuclear weapons, atomic bombs, as opposed to hydrogen bombs. And while they might have been bluffing at first, it wasn't too long before they could back it up. They do have North Korea does have nuclear weapons, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the same skepticism and underestimation was heaped on Kim's claim 6 months ago to have submarine-launched ballistic missile capability. But as Noah Rothman wrote at the time, back when he was at honair.com, the issue with Kim's martial boasting is never if, but rather when. and what we'll be able to do about it if U.S. officials' sneering ridicule proves to be unfounded. Remember Barack Obama calling the Islamic State the JV team? Remember just before Paris he said, well, we've got ISIS contained. And then they didn't. Same thing here. It's never underestimate your enemies, folks. It's almost impossible to intercept a ballistic missile after the nuclear delivery vehicle has left the boost phase. If North Korea were to park a submarine armed with nuclear-tipped submarine-launched ballistic missiles 100 miles off the California coast, it would be infinitely harder for America's continental anti-ballistic missile installations to intercept that threat. In fact, that's kind of interesting. The alternate history scenario, you can see it's on YouTube if you want to look it up, in which Nazi Germany had Me-262 jet fighters, which in this scenario repulsed the D-Day landing, so there was no invasion of Europe to liberate it from Nazi German control. And then Germany develops the atomic bomb in this alternate history scenario and puts them on V-2 rockets, and then they take a submarine, U-boats, and launch V-2 rockets with nuclear warheads on them and wipe out, incinerate Boston and New York, and then force the American surrender. It's starting to sound very familiar, isn't it? If North Korea were to park a submarine armed with nuclear-tipped, submarine-launched ballistic missiles 100 miles off the California coast, it would be infinitely harder for America's continental anti-ballistic missile installations to intercept that threat. The prospect of a North Korean submarine-launched ballistic missile stockpile would also ensure that Pyongyang, the NOCOs, maintain retaliatory nuclear strike capabilities in the event of an American attack of any kind, virtually guaranteeing U.S. paralysis in the event that hostilities broke out again on the Korean Peninsula. So here is the nightmare scenario, ladies and gentlemen. When, at some point in the near future, North Korea has managed to develop enough nuclear weapons, miniaturized warheads, and submarine-launched ballistic missiles to satisfy American skeptics that that North Korea has a modest but effective arsenal of deliverable nuclear weapons, it would not. American skeptics in the Obama regime will never be convinced of that. ISIS is contained, remember? It would not take much effort in that scenario to hold the United States hostage. I live on the West Coast, so this is definitely relevant to me. In the event of a new crisis in relations with North Korea, an outcome that occurs with metronomic regularity whenever the starving criminal state needs a fresh infusion of American capital, the NOCOs might find that U.S. pockets will again loosen if it puts a gun to America's head in the form of a nuclear-armed submarine somewhere off the West Coast. American officials would try to soothe the frayed nerves of frightened Pacific Coast residents, but it would be hollow rhetoric. There would be almost nothing Washington could do to prevent North Korea from launching a nuclear warhead at a major metropolitan area or an EMP attack, electromagnetic pulse attack. Remember that EMP attack? All the NOCOs would have to do is detonate one decent-sized nuclear warhead 300 miles over Kansas, and we're back in approximately 1850 technologically. And remember we talked about this before, the estimates that 90% of the American population would be dead within a year of an electromagnetic pulse attack on the United States. The continental United States. I don't know about Alaska. I guess they're on their own. So, there would be nothing, almost nothing, Washington could do to prevent North Korea from launching a nuclear warhead at a major metropolitan area or at an EMP attack. save for threatening a massive retaliatory response, which after an EMP attack they wouldn't be able to carry out. A threat that is already explicit as it serves as the foundational doctrine of American nuclear deterrence strategy, which has not been helped by Barack Obama getting rid of all our nuclear weapons. And certainly not modernizing any, not updating the arsenal and getting rid of the arsenal we did have. In this scenario, the United States could only react to and not prevent a North Korean nuclear attack, and now by this time, we probably can't even do that much. And there's no way we could retaliate so close to Red Chinese territory without precipitating a nuclear exchange with Beijing. I mean, think about it. If we nuke North Korea, that fallout's going to go somewhere. And if it doesn't go east to China, it's probably going to waft back across the Pacific in our direction. Because that's the jet stream, after all. The direction of the jet stream. And there would be nothing we could do. In other words, we would be helpless. And all our enemies would know it. In fact, they already know it. That is the backdrop against which to view Kim Jong-un's triumphalist claim of having developed thermonuclear warheads, hydrogen bombs. Here's the quote from Yahoo! That's pretty good. .com. I didn't even eat lunch. Never mind. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un appeared on Thursday to claim his country has developed a hydrogen bomb, a step up from the less powerful atomic bombs, but outside experts were skeptical. Kim made the comments as he toured the Fyongchon revolutionary site, which marks the feats of his father who died in 2011. That's Kim Jong-il. And his grandfather, state founder, and here we go, eternal president, Kim Il-sung, the official KCNA news agency said. The work of Kim Il-sung turned the Democratic People's Republic of Korea into a powerful nuclear weapons state ready to detonate a self-reliant A-bomb and H-bomb. A-bomb and H-bomb, not A-bomb or A-bomb and H-bomb, to reliably defend its sovereignty and the dignity of the nation, KCNA quoted Kim Jong-un as saying. I wonder, is there a KCNA radio station in the United States? That would be awkward. Now, maybe he's bluffing. Maybe he's telling the truth. It almost doesn't matter because we have no way of making that determination. And if he's bluffing now, we can safely conclude that he will not be bluffing for long. I think the Chicons are probably feeding them the technology very slowly. Then again, we have no way of knowing the veracity of his claim, which means the prudent course of action is to assume that he can back it up. That's the easy way. And the easy way is a hell of a lot better than finding out the hard way. By the way, the state, well, I guess technically Alaska's closer, but other than Alaska, the continental United States that is closest to North Korea, Washington. Imagine my joy and excitement. Now, the VA story that I mentioned in hour number 1, and a follow-up to yesterday's discussion of the Veterans Administration. Remember I said yesterday that Sloan Gibson, the Deputy Commissar of the Commissariat of Veterans Affairs, had some highly entertaining things to say in congressional testimony before the House Veterans Affairs Committee yesterday. Well, here's where I keep that promise. The headline, "You Can't Fire Your Way to Excellence." Oh boy, it's a pithy phrase, I suppose. And it's true as far as it goes. I mean, now, of course, as far as it goes isn't very far when it comes to VA corruption. And firing the crooks is the first step towards replacing them with non-crooks. And that would presumably be a step in the right direction. Something in which Sloan Gibson clearly is not interested. And here's a quote from the Washington Post. Not stirring the crap here. A Veterans Affairs official on Wednesday defended the commissariat's decision to demote but not fire two senior executives who collected $400,000 in a relocation scheme. Again, that has to include buying a house for them. It has to. How could it not? How could it possibly cost $400,000 to move? Nobody would ever move if that were the case. Excuse me, well, that might include buying a house for them in their destination. I'm guaranteed it includes buying their old home, buying their old house. It has to include that. I can't imagine what else would drive up the price tag so much. And pushed back sharply against lawmakers, Sloan Gibson, for pressing for punishment rather than accountability for the VA workforce. What's the difference between punishment and accountability? Isn't that pretty much the same thing? Aren't the two the same thing conceptually? In my many years in the private sector, doesn't sound like he's in the private sector, does he? I've never encountered an organization where leadership was measured by how many people you fired, Deputy Commissar Sloan Gibson told the House Veterans Affairs Committee. You can't fire your way to excellence. That's a classic Obama-esque rhetorical straw man, isn't it? Nobody outside of William Wayne Zimmerman III, anyway, has said or is saying that leadership is measured by how many people you fire. But in the case of two senior Veterans Affairs executives, Veterans Administration executives, Diana Rubens and Kimberly Graves, who fired two lower-level regional managers for no other reason than to take their positions and their jobs for themselves and pocket nearly $500,000 in relocation expenses so they could move to more desirable locations. Termination does seem like a step that a true leader would take, particularly since there may be criminal charges filed against Miss Rubens and Miss Graves for their actions. I mean, how does it make the VA look when they won't fire these two women who are going to might have criminal charges filed against them, and they won't fire them? I mean, the only thing I can say for Bill Zimmerman is that he didn't file criminal charges against me, but he damn sure fired my ass. But you know what they say about a company culture being set by the boss. Sloan's defiant defense of this outrageously corrupt conduct speaks volumes for the VA's culture. Resuming the quote from the Washington Post. But Gibson, reading from prepared testimony, said the Inspector General's office exaggerated the actions. Oh, I guess that means they didn't buy them a house in their destination, too. Which the watchdog's office has referred to the Injustice, Revenge, and Cover-Up Commissariat for Criminal Prosecution. We won't administer punishment based on Inspector General opinions. Well, if not them, isn't that their job to root out things like this? And if they root something out and you don't act upon it, I mean, this is no different than the Obama administration's the way they treat inspectors general in general. I mean, they ignore them, they fire them, it's... Yeah, most transparent Administration and history. We won't administer punishment based on IG opinions, referrals to the Commissariat of Injustice, Revenge, and Cover-Up. Recycled and embellished media accounts are external pressure, Gibson said. It's simply not right. Oh, it isn't? Well, now you know why I got that resume into the VA. I mean, if you never want to get fired, the VA is a place to work, ladies and gentlemen. And it's not in the best interest of the veterans we serve. He called the case, Sloan Gibson, called the cases failures in judgment and not ethical breaches. They fired two subordinates. They stole their jobs. Criminal prosecution referrals. How is that not an ethical breach? Good Lord. And what does it have to do with the veterans we serve? Yeah, we know how they serve them. Especially given the way that the VA serves veterans is by letting them literally wither on the vine until they expire and then covering it up. And how does deliberate fraud, which again is being criminally investigated, constitute merely judgment failure and not an ethical breach, which is itself a crass euphemism? These two women stole two subordinates' jobs. They fired them. You might have deduced that this is kind of a raw nerve for me. How about asking the two lower-level regional managers who got bleep canned for no reason other than Rubens and Graves' greed how they feel about their failures in judgment? I'd say those two women are keeping company with my old friend Zim as far as they're concerned. Yes, that is in the Wrath of Khan context. Ah, Kirk. Zim, my old friend. Do you remember the Klingon proverb that says that revenge is a dish that is best served cold? It is very cold in the VA. This also, in turn, helps explain why there has been no reform of and at the VA in the year and a half since the original VA scandal broke. And why would there be when the culture in that agency is indistinguishable from the imperious, morally supremacist, royally entitled mentality that permeates the entire Obama regime? If you want genuine reform at the VA, you're going to have to wield your axe a lot higher in the chain of command than Sloan bleeping Gibson. Oh! A little congressional update. First of all, the House of Representatives... the House. Yeah, the Senate already took care of it yesterday. House of Representatives has passed a continuing resolution extension to next Wednesday to avoid a government shutdown today. Because remember today, December the 11th, was the government shutdown deadline. So now it's been extended 5 days. Remember that used to be a big deal? Now it's like, oh, this is just what we do. Well, we can't govern coherently or intelligently or responsibly, so let's just pass another continuing resolution. Yeah, I would bet you, we'll never find this out, but I will bet you that Paul Ryan is going to drop a Cleveland steamer in John Boehner's Christmas card envelope this year. Would not surprise me at all. But the other item is from yesterday. A bipartisan opposition to the use of military force resolution against ISIS has been introduced in the House. Yeah, you heard me right. Opposition to the use of military force. And I'm really on the substance of it. That's not an exaggeration nor hyperbole. This is from thehill.com. 2 House lawmakers on Thursday introduced a measure to ban military force against the Islamic State, making it the first bipartisan and bicameral measure to do so. Representative Scott Rigel of Virginia's 2nd Congressional District, a Republican, and Peter Welch, Democrat of Vermont, introduced the legislation, a companion bill to a measure in the Senate offered 6 months ago by Senators Tim Kaine, Democrat of Virginia, and Jeff Flake, Republican of Arizona. It would expire after 3 years, unless reauthorized. Repeal the Iraq War authorization for the use of military force and be the sole authorization for the phony war against ISIS. End of quote. I'm sorry. Well, what's the point of it? Is there anything stupider than a war declaration with an expiration date? Do you realize that if the United States declared war against Nazi Germany, or declaration, excuse me, do you realize that if the U.S. declaration of war against Nazi Germany had a 3-year time limit, American forces would have quit and gone home around the time of the Battle of the Bulge? Before the job was finished? Leaving all of Europe to be overrun by the Red Army? Do you realize that that same stipulation in the declaration of war against Japan would have had us turning tail and running even before the Philippines had been liberated? Guaranteeing the Soviet conquest of Korea, Japan, China, Indochina, Indonesia, maybe even Australia? Or simply that with such an opposition to the use of military force, the best that could happen is ISIS just runs out the clock like the Taliban has been doing? And they stormed Kandahar the other day. Kandahar Airport. The U.S. military base on the Kandahar Airport. Just running out the clock until 2018. And the worst, well, I think we know what that would look like. So how will this opposition to the use of military force look then? After, say, Chicago has been nuked, or nerve gas distributed throughout the New York subway system, or Washington, D.C. getting radiologically dusted. But that isn't even the worst part of it, folks. Here is from Section 3 of the Opposition for Use of United States Armed Forces. Section A. Section 3, Paragraph A. Authorization. The President is authorized to use the armed forces of the United States as the President determines necessary and appropriate against ISIS or associated persons or forces as defined in Section 6. Okay, sounds good so far. But just wait. Paragraph B. War Powers Resolution Requirements. Subparagraph 1. Specific statutory authorization. Consistent with Section 8A1 of the War Powers Resolution, 50 U.S.C., United States Code, 1547A1, Congress declares that this section is intended to constitute specific statutory authorization within the meaning of Section 5B of the War Powers Resolution, 50 United States Code, 1544B. Of course, the War Powers Act is unconstitutional. That should be remembered. Paragraph 2. Applicability of other requirements. Nothing in this Act supersedes any requirements of the War Powers Resolution, 50 United States Code 1541 et sequitur, which is unconstitutional. Subparagraph C. Here's the punchline. Purpose. The purpose of this authorization is to protect the lives of United States citizens and to provide military support to regional partners in their battle to defeat ISIS. The use of significant United States ground troops in combat against the Islamic State, except to protect the lives of United States citizens from imminent threat, is not consistent with such purpose? Really? Seriously? Are you bleeping kidding me? Not consistent? The ostensible purpose of this resolution cannot be fulfilled any other way. And again, what is the point of an authorization for the use of military force that doesn't authorize the use of military force? Which is why I call it an opposition to the use of military force. And the one Obama was seeking was worse than this one? How is that even possible, short of a U.S. unconditional surrender to be signed in the Oval Office itself? And since this opposition to the use of military force essentially codifies the losing status quo, why in the blue hell did the GOP want to do that, given what's coming? I tell you, man, I would not wipe my ass with this opposition to the use of military force, and any significant Republican support for it will forfeit the party's claim to being serious on national security. Period. Vector Sigma. You know, I'm going to do that. Here's what that authorization or opposition to the use of military force deserves. Vector Sigma. I wonder if I can do this. I wonder if I can do this. Good. I can do that. I'm trying to figure out a way to take care of typos without having to stop the show in order to take care of them. Oh, here comes ObamaCare. Yeah, a new CBO report. Obamacare will reduce the American workforce by another 2 million over the next decade, according to the Congressional Budget Office. Now, what I want to know is, where was this kind of candor from the Congressional Budget Office before Obamacare was enacted? The quote is from, well, it's from the Congressional Budget Office. The Unaffordable Care Act will make the labor supply, measured as the total compensation paid to workers, 0.86% smaller in 2025 than it would have been in the absence of that law, the Congressional Budget Office estimates. 3/4 of that decline will occur because of health insurance expansions which raise effective tax rates on earnings from labor. For instance, by phasing out health insurance subsidies as people's income rises, and thus reduce the amount of labor that workers choose to supply. The labor force is projected to be about 2 million full-time equivalent workers smaller in 2025 than it is now. When the workforce participation rate is the lowest it's been in 40 years. Don't tell me we're not under the permanent depression. Under the UCA, Unaffordable Care Act, than it would have been otherwise in the absence of Obamacare. Those estimates were based mainly on CBO's calculations of the effects of the law's major components on marginal and average tax rates, and on the agency's analysis of research about the change in the labor supply resulting from a change in tax rates. For components of the law that were difficult to express in terms of changes in tax rates, CBO based its estimates on a review of the available literature about similar policy changes. Close quote. This is not so much 2 million jobs destroyed as 2 million jobs aborted, never created. And if there's anything we know about the CBO, it's that they almost certainly are lowballing that figure. Small wonder that even Democrats are now coming around to the idea of repealing the murderer's row of Obamacare standalone taxes, like the Cadillac tax and the medical devices tax. They blitz the wallets of their special interests, big labor in particular. And you know the old saying about left-wing nuts being conservative when it comes to their own money. The reaction of each side of the aisle is what we've long come to expect. Republicans once again pointed out the gapingly obvious, as they have for the past almost 6 years. Quote from thehill.com, when the president's health law hurts the labor force at the same time it increases health care premiums and taxes, it's clear the law is not working for the American people, said Senate Finance Committee Chairman and President pro tempore of the Senate, Orrin Hatch of Utah. Republican, of course. The CBO's latest report confirms yet another broken promise and negative consequences stemming from Obamacare. End of interrupt quote. While the White House, now notice this is not congressional Democrats saying any of this, the White House wallowed in self-congratulatory delusion and outright fantasy. Concluding the quote, the administration in the past has argued that the CBO figures also reflect new flexibility provided to workers through the health care law. Yeah, they got all kinds of flexibility to pay more in premiums and deductibles with less money. It has also repeatedly disputed claims that the law is a job killer by pointing to the new jobs created with the millions of people who gained health care. See what I mean about delusion? Who gained health care coverage. From the month Obamacare became law, the private sector has added 13.7 million jobs over 69 straight months, the longest streak on record, a White House spokeswoman said. Bullcrap! In what quantum reality? Certainly not this one. The private sector has lost 13.7 million jobs over that time, perhaps. Mine were most definitely among them, and they're never coming back. There are only so many spatulas to go around, after all. Hint, hint. The only thing that has grown is the pool of us permanently jobless that have ceased to exist as far as the Obama economy is concerned. An ever-shrinking bubble of unreality in which everything is hunky-dory. His Islamo-communist policies all work, and the American people still idolatrously worship him. Idolatrously. That's hard to say. Like president. I have a problem with that. Maybe I won't if we get an actual president a little over a year from now. The real world is dramatically different. Now we go to thefiscaltimes.com. Actually, Ed Morrissey column in the Fiscal Times. In other words, Avik Roy writes, all of the disruption, spending, taxation, and premium hikes in Obamacare have only reduced the percentage of U.S. residents without health insurance by 2.7%. That's almost as big a bang for their buck as reducing carbon emissions to lower global temperature. From 13.9% to 11.1%, a remarkably small reduction and far lower than what the law was supposed to achieve. And why is that? Because most of, and that percentage is bogus, remember folks, it's more like 5% that genuinely want health insurance and can't get it. The rest, young people who don't want to spend the money on it and don't have the disposable income to do so. And ironically are being stuck holding the bag for Obamacare's exploding, skyrocketing costs. Furthermore, with enrollment vastly underperforming expectations, what did I just say? Over the first 3 years of the system, there will be little room for further improvement. No reduction at all, actually. Quite the opposite. So there are, in reality, fewer people on health insurance now than before Obamacare, because you have to count the millions of policy cancellations from 2 years ago, not more. Finally, the cost curve has indeed been bent upwards. And CMS chalks it up to Obamacare, healthcare, CMS chalks it up to Obamacare, Center for Medicaid Service, Medicare Services, Medicaid. What? That's all the same. The Obama regime. And they're actually admitting that it's because of Obamacare. Healthcare spending rose 5% last year, well above the rate of inflation, and the fastest it had grown since 2007. In the run-up to this insanity, this madness. Medicaid spending rose 11% thanks to Obamacare's expansions, but Medicare also rose 5.5%, and spending in private insurance plans rose 4.5% as well. The return to faster growth of healthcare costs, CMS concluded in its report, was largely influenced by the coverage expansions of the Unaffordable Care Act. In other words, you drive up demand and you contract supply, what happens to the price? Economics 101, people. All those old and sick people hitting their new coverages all at once, in other words. Like that's any kind of surprise. I'd wager the percentages are a lot higher simply because the Obama regime was the source of them. But to tally things up, Obamacare has accomplished none of the things we were promised it would, all of the things we warned would happen as a result of it, and of course, none of Obama's promises were kept. Ladies and gentlemen, you could call it a comprehensive failure if there was any reason to believe that this boondoggle wasn't deliberately inflicted upon we the people. As such, in that sense, in that case, it's been a tremendous, unparalleled success. And the last item on the stack for the week, heading into the weekend. By the way, the Seattle Seahawks are, by my numbers, 11-point favorites over the Baltimore Ravens on Sunday. And I would have much preferred to see that game on Sunday night than Patriots-Texans, which should be Oilers. I don't want to see the Patriots again. I want to see my team. And by the way, my team just might be in a third straight Super Bowl. Not predicting it yet, but we got that look about us. It's like someone on Reddit said after the game, the 38-7 win over Minnesota last Sunday, which was a big game for playoff implications, by the way. And someone on Reddit said, "The Seahawks are coming! Run for your lives!" We're back. And this is a upbeat, sunny item to close out the week with. I know you'll appreciate it. You're welcome in advance. Barack Obama shut down an operation that could have stopped the San Bernardino jihadist terrorist attack. Yeah, I told you it was upbeat. At very least, it'll fire you up for the weekend. So says a note the tense here, former Commissariat of Homeland Insecurity employee. Maybe Barack Obama should be put on that no-fly list of his and have all his golf clubs confiscated. This would make him an accessory to terrorism, after all. The quote is from Newsmax. Philip Haney, a former Homeland Insecurity employee who was part of an operation in California to investigate possible terrorists, told Fox News that if the Obama White House had not shut down his program in 2012, he could have prevented last week's San Bernardino attack that killed 14 people. I'll give you a few seconds to let the red haze descend from your vision. Haney, appearing Thursday on Fox News Channel's The Kelly File, so Megyn Kelly's program, said his program identified the mosque attended by Syed Farouk, who with his wife Tashfeen Malik the Muslim Bonnie and Clyde, carried out the mass shooting as being the home of a group of individuals already being investigated. You know, we talked yesterday about how the French are closing upwards of 160 mosques? Now you know why. As we were tracking them, we would have put the red light on them, which presumably would mean the laser sight of an automatic rifle. Therefore, two things very plausibly would have happened. Either Syed would have been put on the no-fly list because of the association with that mosque, and or the K-1 visa his wife was given would have been denied because of his affiliation with a known jihadist organization. End of quote. And the reason why this DHS counterterrorism program was shut down by the Obama regime, other than Al-Qaeda is dead and GM is alive, and did you know that I bagged Osama bin Laden? Because it constituted anti-Muslim profiling. Anti-Muslim profiling, ladies and gentlemen. And profiling is wrong. And anti-Muslim profiling is Islamophobic. No matter how many lives it may save. The regime's retort, Mr. Haney has holes in his story, but they decline to elaborate. Beats me why they're being so reticent about it. I mean, why would they lie at this point? Or better put, why would they stop lying now? Imagine if one of your loved ones was among those 14 people mowed down a week ago. All part of King Hussein's faith-based counterterrorism policy, I guess. I've just made a programming decision. There's not enough time left for these two town hall pieces. But I'm going to be sharing in the podcast-only third segment because they're just too good not to have wind up in the Museum of Broadcasting someday. So that is what I will be doing after the top of the hour here. The headline on one from John Hawkins. Tell me where you have heard this before, ladies and gentlemen. The tribalist liberal losers who want virtue on the cheap. Right, tribe? Wrong, tribe. And Derek Hunter's piece from earlier this week on the Democrat Party is a death cult. Two epic rants that I'm going to be bringing you in the podcast-only third hour of Open Thighs Friday today. So download the podcast and you'll get that added bonus. It's like a bonus chapter in a book. or like in the paperback edition of a book. It's not in the hardcover edition, but it is in the paperback edition. So that's something to another added reason to download the podcast, today's podcast, here at blogtalkradio.com/HSR Network. And again, 22 hours, not 22 hours, excuse me, 18 hours and 3 minutes from now, 18 hours and 2 minutes from now, the Saturday afternoon extravaganza comes round again. Starting 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific tomorrow, blogtalkradio.com/American Daily Review. Climaxing at 4 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Pacific, with Constitution Radio with Douglas V. Gibbs. Join us tomorrow, and have a great weekend, on-air listeners. I just can't wait to get to Monday, folks. What can I say? See you later. Podcast only, hour number 3. I just had to share these 2 town hall rants because they are awesome. And one, of course, the one we're leading off with, echoes me. So I had to share that. I mean, everywhere I look, everywhere I turn, there's JASmius echo syndrome. People are starting to say now what I've been saying for years and months, as the case may be, the issue may be. John Hawkins is first up at townhall.com. The tribalist liberal losers who want virtue on the cheap. Now, it's not that all liberals are stupid. It's just that liberalism makes them sound stupid. For liberals, it's not about being open-minded. It's saying things they believe an open-minded person would say. How they define it. And of course, open-minded means whatever they believe. It's not about being smart. It's saying things that they believe a smart person would say. How they define smart, meaning anybody who thinks like they do. It's not about being virtuous. It's about saying things they believe a virtuous person would say because only they are virtuous. The left's renowned moral supremacism. Since their solution for everything is higher taxes, more spending, and bigger government, you'd think liberals would care more than anyone else about making sure our tax dollars are well spent and that government runs smoothly. Unfortunately, that would require logically evaluating programs they advocate, never mind their constitutionality, or lack thereof, and making adjustments, and they've become such prisoners of their own doctrine that they're incapable of doing it. For liberals, it's never about whether a program works or whether a position makes sense. It's about showing solidarity with their tribe. Right tribe? Wrong tribe. Penthouse? Outhouse. I've been saying that for years now. Now John Hawkins has finally gotten on the JASmius bandwagon, I guess. Trust me, Mr. Hawkins, you didn't originate that. I did. Feeling better about themselves or virtue signaling. Have you ever noticed that even though liberals always talk about scientific consensus when it comes to global warming, 90% of them are incapable of making any kind of scientific argument about global warming, and most of the others do it badly? Because, of course, the data don't support it. Or them. That's because saying you want to fight global warming is all about showing you care about science. And want to take care of the Earth. Save the planet. Remember Captain Planet? Remember how long it that was during the 80s. This is not new. Ladies and gentlemen, remember the first global confab on global warming? It was in Brazil in 1992. I mean, Al Gore made his name on this crap all the way back then. Remember, he wrote, I forget the name of the book, his original book on global warming. Remember that came out in the late 80s? This is not new, folks. So that's because saying you want to fight global warming is all about showing you care about science and want to take care of the Earth. Even if you take private jets, ride in SUVs, and produce a carbon footprint the size of a small town every year like Al Gore, you supposedly care more and are more scientific because you regularly blather on about mythical anthropogenic climate change. Why do liberals crassly demand gun control when there's still blood drying on the ground after a mass murder? Because it's their way of signaling not just that they care, but that you don't. You can point out that the policies they're calling for would not have stopped the shooting all day long, but it won't faze them. Because they don't really care about stopping shootings. They care about signaling their virtue to each other and lording it over the rest of us. Remember, we're not opponents to them. We are enemies. We are evil to as far as they're concerned. And what do you do with evil? You wipe it out. By any means necessary. How is it that liberals refuse to acknowledge all the poor Americans who were put out of work by minimum wage policies, minimum wage hikes? It's not about the policy. It's about signaling that they're enlightened people who want to help the poor, those that remain employed, by raising their wages. People get fired, that's the fault of the greedy business owners, so they can still feel good about themselves. See, nothing is ever their fault about their policies. Their policies always create disastrous results, but it's never their fault because they always have a built-in other, a built-in scapegoat, someone to point the finger at. Why do you think they demonize us? Why do you think they demonize business owners? Why do you think they demonize actual climatologists and not political hacks? Why do you think they do that? To have a ready-made scapegoat on every single issue. To blame the failures of their policies, which always fail. Why do liberals always advocate for more welfare, more food stamps, more giveaways? More, as Agent Smith said in that ridiculous battle scene with all his clones and Neo and Matrix Reloaded. Because, or despite all the damage they do to the people who are taking handouts. Because they get to claim that we are heartless for not wanting to do the same thing, which they think makes them compassionate in comparison. Is that true? Does it make sense? Of course not. But as Doug Bandow noted at rightwingnews.com, years ago, Marvin Olasky wrote how compassion traditionally meant to suffer with. Over the years, it turns out, or it has turned into writing a check. Now it means making other people write checks. Remember how the left always, how Democrats always exempt themselves from the policies they inflict on the rest of us? Hello? With liberals, it's always about virtue on the cheap, without their having to sacrifice anything personally. They want to help those poor Syrian Muslim jihadist refugees by sending them to red states that don't want them, like Texas, like we discussed earlier this week. It's liberals flanked by a squad of armed bodyguards saying you don't need a gun. It's Hillary Rodham Clinton demanding that we take every woman who claims to be a victim of sexual assault at her word, except the ones accusing her husband of the same thing. Remember what happened to, well, certainly Juanita Broderick, but who am I thinking of? That whistleblower, I'm drawing a blank. I can't remember. You know who I'm talking about. No, I'm not talking about Monica Lewinsky either. By the way, can you believe that she is in her 40s now? Gee, where does the time go? I know, into the past. That's what I'm always telling Mrs. Hart Starboard. When you're liberal, freedom is your enemy. Because most people aren't part of your tribe. Right tribe? Wrong tribe. They don't agree with your way of thinking, and they're not going to do what you want them to do, and therefore they, in other words, we, are evil and must be eradicated. This is why liberals love to control people with big government so much. It's the tool they use to promote their tribe. Hurt the enemies of their tribe and show their virtue to the world without actually having to do anything. At the end of the day, liberals are the living embodiment of the troublemakers Eric Hoffer described when he said, "We all have private ails. The troublemakers are they who need public cures for their private ails." By the way, isn't Carolyn Glick hot? She's another columnist at townhall.com, but she's hot. I think she's hot. Nothing hotter than a woman who is also right. Ladies and gentlemen, and of course, you remember what Rush Limbaugh said? Oh, gosh, 30 years ago. Feminism was created to afford or to provide access to by ugly women to the American mainstream of life, or mainstream of American life. Yeah, that's right. Well, I just mangled that, didn't I? Feminism provides ugly women with access to the American mainstream of life. I think that's how it goes. Remember Uglo Americans? It's pretty good. It's pretty good. Hey, you know what? Why not pattern yourself after the best, ladies and gentlemen? That's why I am the poor man's Rush Limbaugh, among other things. And yes, as Derek Hunter put it on Monday, the Democrat Party is a death cult. They're determined to get us all killed because being proven right is more important than our lives, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I am so sick of these liberal left commie bastard Democrats waiting to pounce on death and exploit it to their advantage. It takes a special kind of person to do it, to see something awful unfolding on television and think, how can I use this to my advantage? That's the modern American left, and it has to be destroyed. While the San Bernardino terrorists were still at large, all 3 Democrats running for president took the opportunity to call for gun control. That's the sort of sociopathic disconnect from human decency we expect from serial killers, not someone who seeks to become the next leader of the formerly free world. These people spent the week after 2 Islamic terrorists murdered 14 people blaming inanimate objects for their actions and seeking to take rights away from innocent Americans. You know the vast herds of wild guns that used to roam this continent. Vast flocks of guns flying across the sky, vast flocks of assault weapons and rifles and whatever, thundering across the Great Plains, looking for people to shoot. Because it's the guns' fault. It's not, oh, it can't be Muslims' fault. Muslims, well, that's the religion of peace. Right? Communists continually seek a Reichstag burn in order to empower government over the individual. A terrorist attack is the same as a school shooting, is the same as a storm, is the same as a drought. A crisis to be exploited, a chance to advance their agenda. There is nothing they won't exploit for their cause. They will goose-step forward over any terrain, over the bodies piled deep in the cities they control, or the 100 million their philosophy deprived of life in the last century. Nothing short of everything is enough. Yeah, well, to use the Klingon version of this word, man up! Enough! The New York Times hasn't run a page-1 editorial since 1920. 95 years ago. Pearl Harbor didn't warrant one, nor did 9/11. But the jihadist attack in San Bernardino did. And it wasn't to condemn the attack. Oh, no. Nor was it to call for reform for the apostatization of Islam, to purge its orthodoxy. Purge Islam of the Quran, basically. No! It was a call for our rights to be curtailed. You see, the Reichstag burned this week, even though it didn't catch fire at all. From the moment the first shot was fired, the communist left snapped into action. Anchors and talking heads were postulating it had to be a right-winger. It had to be a Planned Parenthood. And they knew the only solution to a problem still happening was to strip us of our rights. Shall we revisit Amendment number 2, ladies and gentlemen? A well-regulated militia, well-regulated meaning to make, put in good order, make it functional, the best it can be. Being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That is declarative. There's no nuance in there. All federal gun laws are unconstitutional. Period. The states can regulate guns all they want to the extent that their constitutions allow it. But the Second Amendment forbids any restriction on gun ownership. Period. Exclamation point. But a funny thing happened on the way to the Reichstag fire. The fire burned itself out. The terrorist, Syed Farouk, and a mail-order accomplice, the Muslim Bonnie and Clyde, weren't white Christians. They were Islamic jihadists. And that wasn't the narrative. I mean, if it had been, they wouldn't have been focusing on gun control. They would have been focusing on right-wing terrorism. But since the people couldn't be blamed, it had to be the object, the inanimate object, their weapons. Democrats view terrorism and groups such as ISIS and Al-Qaeda as distractions. Hey, listen to Bernie Sanders if you don't believe me. He refuses to talk about foreign policy. He wants to string up rich people from the nearest lampposts. They don't honestly care to defeat our enemies. Communists' focus is domestic. And plus, they don't look at... Muslims are part of the right tribe. Remember? Through the lens of anti-colonialism. The left is anti-Western. They're not anti-anybody else. Barack Obama didn't run to fundamentally transform the world, only America. The world will be next, I suppose. In a world full of dictators, despots, and strongmen, Democrats see the biggest problem in the world as free American people. Well, when we were free. We're not anymore. Obama only bothers himself with matters outside our borders when he can use it to his advantage domestically or when he has to, like flooding the country with Muslim refugees from Syria or wherever else. Just to use one example. After the Charlie Hebdo attack last January, he couldn't be bothered to show solidarity with the leaders of the free world, formerly free world. I mean, he did not even put up a hashtag on Twitter. Because he doesn't have solidarity with them. Remember, he's an Islamo-communist. You talk about a witch's brew of a hybrid of an upbringing. After 130 people were slaughtered in Paris, he could only bring himself to call it a distraction. What? From what? From Greenapalooza, of course. And what have you heard about that this week? Nothing, have you? Yeah, another one, another Greenapalooza down the drain, which is a good thing, because the West... I mean, Barack Obama might be willing to commit economic suicide on behalf of the United States, but no other country in the developed world is. When it's agenda uber alles, agenda overall, bodies are bumps in the road, ladies and gentlemen. After San Bernardino, communists were ready. It was the right's fault, aided by guns, and the only sensible response is more gun control. Still high on the Colorado shooting by a lunatic with no electricity or running water in his woodland shack. Oh, that would be Robert Louis Deere, as in the headlights. You know, the Ying-Ta we talked about yesterday. They set the ball in motion. It just didn't work out for them. When the terrorists were identified, the left was hesitant. This was, after all, San Bernardino, not New York. Who the hell attacks in San Bernardino? Answer, all the jihadists that lived there. But the ball was in motion, even though it had been knocked off track. Kind of like the one in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Still, patience had run out. In spite of the facts, they made their move and they were, by God, sticking to it. Congressional Democrats, the White House, the media, it's all gun control all the time. Farouk's burqa-wearing wife praises the Islamic State in the middle of the attack, as we reported the other day. But it's the gun's fault. Moreover, it's our fault for having the right to own a gun, even though they procured their guns illegally. And we, not our enemies, must be stopped. It's ironic the same people who claim it is open season on young black men by the police openly say police are the only people in society who should be trusted to have access to guns. Although that's probably that's going away too. Remember what I said the other day? If you strip Americans of their Second Amendment rights, confiscate all our guns, and you order the police, law enforcement, to stand down, what's left? Chaos is what's left. Societal breakdown. And what does that lead to? Nationwide martial law. Operation Jade Helm. Remember that from this summer? I'm just connecting the dots, folks. Don't shoot. Don't shoot the messenger. They either have absolute faith black voters won't draw the line between their 2 points, or in the media, or putting those points in public view together. But that's neither here nor there. The greatest killer of young black men is not police, nor is it legally sold firearms. It's other young black men with illegal guns. Yet the left isn't going after them or illegal guns. Again, bodies are an opportunity or a distraction, not real people. No, the switch has been flipped. The paper of record, the New York Times, the paper of record for the rich white cocktail party set, put it on the front page, page 1, to write the following, and I quote, "Opponents of gun control are saying, as they do after every killing, that no law can unfailingly forestall a specific criminal." That is true. Oh, they admit it! They are talking, many with sincerity, oh gee, thanks a lot, New York Times, about the constitutional challenges to effective gun regulation, which every federal gun regulation is unconstitutional, period. Those challenges exist. They point out that determined killers obtained weapons illegally in places like France, England, Norway that have strict gun laws. Yes, they did. Oh, they really said that. They just admitted gun control doesn't work in preventing mass active shooter events. But this is the best the New York Times can come up with on page 1. But at least those countries are trying. Wait for it. Wait for it. The last line is the communists' mindset. At least those countries are trying. And cover for government power grabs. And that's no coincidence. During, not even after, during San Bernardino came the calls to do something! It's the same calls heard in Moscow before the revolution. The same heard in Berlin after the Reichstag fire. Always the same. Tyranny always waits for an opportunity and opportunists willing to exploit it. This is how liberty gets smothered, by good intentions. It's almost like the Padme Amidala line at the end of Star Wars Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. Remember, she said, "So this is how liberty dies, with thunderous applause." But they, the left, have exposed themselves again now, as they've exposed themselves before, as they'll expose themselves again. Unless they're defeated. But then they're too big to defeat by this time. When I hear Republicans and our conservatives whine about this, that, or the other thing when it comes to someone who agrees with them 80% of the time, I'm reminded of why we lose. Tell me where you've heard that sentiment expressed before. I'm reminded of the libertarians who cheered as McCain lost states on election night 2008. They weren't cheering each Obama win, at least most weren't, I hope. They were cheering each McCain loss. They hated McCain that much. And trust me, I hate McCain too, but you know what? Whatever else you can say about John McCain, and there really isn't anything else you can say for him, he was a Republican. It's not much, but it's something. And he chose Sarah Palin as his running mate. So on that basis, I held my nose practically to the point of it ripping off my face and voted for it. I wasn't going to, and I did. By the way, I won't vote for Donald Trump because Donald Trump's not a Republican. Like I say, whatever else you can say about John McCain, at least he was a Republican. Donald Trump isn't. You see, their cause, as is ours, is now set back to the point it may be impossible to achieve. Because this is elections are zero-sum games. If McCain was going to lose, Obama was going to win. Now, I detest John McCain too, but he would have been better than Barack Obama. I mean, it sucks that we end up in positions like that where, we've got to, be enthusiastic, muster enthusiasm about half a loaf, but better than nothing. So libertarians, Tea Partiers, we're all in the same boat. And now, this is why I rail against ideological purity, the purity fetish of the Tea Party. Because of that fetish, our cause may be impossible to achieve. But at least they have their self-righteousness. At least they can pat themselves on the back in the wilderness. Because they didn't want to win. They didn't want to actually do the hard work of winning elections in order to put themselves in a position of power to implement the policies we want to see, restoring the republic. Every day I see allies attack and impugn the intelligence of fellow fighters for liberty in the same trenches over who is more this or that. Frankly, given what we're up against, what the other side wants to do, who gives a damn? The next president, if there is one, can do a lot of damage. Look at. I know. Look, is there any damage left to do? And you'd have a point. But any of the Democrats will do more damage than any of the Republicans, which doesn't include Donald Trump. If you're willing to sit out this election because your candidate doesn't end up being the nominee, assuming your candidate isn't Donald Trump, you are, with all due respect, an idiot. I'd use expletives, but it wouldn't get past even the BTR censors, I guess. I mean, I noticed that I was only a 7-second delay today, so I guess I'm getting back in their good graces. But it's awful that our choice might be between someone who isn't great and someone who is awful, but you dance with the girl that brung you. I would not only vote for Lindsey Graham, I'd work tirelessly to elect him if he wins the nomination, which, of course, he won't. So when I read stories of moneyed insiders threatening to sit on the sidelines if their candidate isn't the nominee, I have to wonder how these people benefit from a Hillary Clinton presidency. Anyone who doesn't do all they can to win for whomever the Republican nominee is, other than Donald Trump, has thrown in with the left. They're pissing on the Constitution, which has already been shredded, so I guess you wouldn't realize it if that was what you're doing. They're only interested in themselves. Their network, their casinos, every crevasse from which they derive their money will never see a penny from me. I don't have any to give them, but the stakes are too high to accept anything short of vanquishing communists in the next election. To hell with them. Bleep them. If you aren't on board for beating them, you're on board with them. And voting for Donald Trump is being on board with them, by the way. We have just over a year of, well, just under a year, actually, of we have just over a year of rampaging Barack Obama wiping himself with what makes our country great. Well, I don't think we've survived that. I still think cultural overhang is keeping most conservatives from realizing that the country is already lost. But if we get 4 more years of a Democrat, you can not only kiss the Second Amendment goodbye, you can already, you can forget it all. You can either be smugly proud of whatever sick moral victory you'll claim because your candidate was better, or you can save the Reichstag and the Constitution from the flame, which it's too late for the Constitution, but maybe you can save the Reichstag, I don't know. And to those of you who always write, usually liberals, when I make Reichstag or similar analogies, going Godwin, as it were, full frontal Godwin, you stop acting like them, I'll stop comparing you to them. And maybe not even then. See you tomorrow on the Saturday Afternoon Extravaganza, American Daily Review, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific, blogtalkradio.com/American Daily Review.